Hi, Pierre. Nice to have you with us today.
Thank you, Guy. I'm very happy to be here to have this discussion on DORA.
So DORA sounds like a Disney character, but unfortunately it is not. It's Dory was a Disney character, or Pixar, I should say. So DORA is, of course, serious business. It stands for Digital Operational Resiliency Act, and it is the newest regulation which has been issued on the European side. And we'll go into in a moment who is covered and what it means. But it is probably one of the most serious regulations we have seen and also most comprehensive. So please stay with us. At the end, I think we'll give you some hints of what we think are the most critical things you have to keep in mind, because there's much to do, but there's a few critical things to keep a particular eye on. Maybe, Pierre, some comments about who is covered by DORA.
To the best of my understanding, DORA covers the European Union, including Switzerland. And so any financial organization, any organization subject to a local financial regulator in Europe and Switzerland is under the DORA regulation.
I would like to add a comment. There's still a few things where the local authorities will tell us exactly what they think in terms of implementation. It's a regulation, so people have to implement it as is, a bit like GDPR. It's not a directive like the sister regulation called NIS2, which is a directive, so where the local authorities have a lot more room for interpretation. Here it's a regulation, so you have to implement it as is, but nevertheless there's a few areas, and we'll talk about some, where still the local authorities have to specify things. So we'll have to update you a little bit later in the year if some key things become better known. Right. And of course, all these actors you described, I think they're already a little bit used to regulation at large. Maybe we'll talk a bit more what is unique about this one versus others.
It's interesting to note that when it comes to organizations that are regulated by the financial regulator, it covers a very wide variety. From my experience, it covers large banks, which are on their own very sophisticated, as well as small investment banks, which are significantly less sophisticated, or private banks, or insurance companies, or even stockbrokers. And so stockbrokers, for example, we should not necessarily expect that they have the whole sophistication and are, just by the virtue of being in the finance industry, necessarily already compliant to everything that DORA requires.
Well, before we go into the different area DORA covers, maybe one comment is, I think for me personally, we have to imagine that this DORA came out after COVID. After or during the Ukraine war, in some sense. I think today many topics which we will cover have a lot more significance, practically and I would say politically. So I think that when I read the DORA document, I always had that in the back of my mind, and I think many things which are written down today are certainly the meaning of them are deeper, and the consequences maybe also more complete. I read the initial things were in the beginning of the Ukraine war, where we were afraid of Russian cyber attacks and other things. We have seen COVID, we can imagine many other things. So I think we have to also take this into account when we look at what is required and what is expected. Any comments on that side from your side?
No, I totally agree with you. I also want to substantiate what you said earlier, in a sense that DORA still has some aspects that are grayed, for which we will need some further qualification from the local regulators. And so we will see how it evolves. We will see what are the different aspects that are not yet very clear at this moment, and see what the implications are for all the organizations subject to it.
Yeah. So maybe let's go a little bit quickly into the areas. I think, for example, and please give your opinions. Of course, it's ICT risk management, and that's everybody mentioned. And that's mainly preventive controls and risk management we're talking about. We have, I think, an interesting one is a third party, which I was a bit surprised when I read what is required. We know that a lot of the business, and depending on the financial institution, more or less, some outsource non-essential work, some may want still to do a lot by themselves. But certainly, in general, third-party support is growing, and the risk they carry for the institution and for the system at large is certainly important. And maybe one comment I have to say, I think the spirit always of this kind of regulation is while we talk about an individual institution, I think the regulator spirit is of course always to keep the trust in the financial system. And more than worry about an individual bank or individual financial institution of some sort. And in the third-party side, we'll see that in a moment in a big way. So they always want to avoid that the market loses trust, the customers lose trust in any way they can, and that's why they are always interested in avoiding what they call systemic risk. Yeah. So more widespread, and especially also when it comes to third party, there are some third parties which are used by everybody in some sense. So if there's a problem, or by many, in some cases, when there's a problem with those, of course, it's more of a market issue. It's not an individual company or institution issue. Any thought about that aspect of things?
Well, specifically on the third party, it strikes me that most of the large organizations, including the international banks I worked with at the risk committee, at the CISO level, for these very sophisticated organizations, we always considered third party to be one of the biggest risks we could envisage across the entire organization. This was, however, not necessarily recognized by the smaller financial organizations. So I think the regulator did very well to identify third party and specify that third party should be a specific element that needs to be addressed. This reflects the reality of the risk landscape for most organizations. And I'm very thankful that third party has been singled out so specifically within DORA.
Yeah, and I think even what I was surprised if they have now some pan-European, or even call them this way, third parties, which is supposed to be overseen on their side, not on an individual company. I think they call the lead overseer. That is a role which still has to be specified, or nominations have to be done. But I could imagine that most banks may use Microsoft or Microsoft Cloud in some form or another. So that would be something on their side. Maybe Google or others will also come in.
Or Salesforce, or equivalent big monster, SAP and whatnot. These would be the big ones.
So I think, obviously every single bank, and you specified well, it would not be able to impose or request something to one of these bigger suppliers. And of course, the European Commission has dealt with Google, has dealt with Facebook or others. So they understand, and they took their responsibilities, and which I'm grateful to actually deal at that company, at that scale, on behalf, in some sense, of everybody else. Any thought about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's very powerful. You might recall that I worked with Microsoft, that I was the CISO for Microsoft in Asia, and that was during the time when we started deploying Azure, the cloud solution. And I remember very vividly that inside Microsoft, we thought that we knew what we would accept and not accept. And we were quite strict about that. But increasingly, we had financial regulator knocking on our door and saying, no, for the finance organizations, you've got to accept more. And financial regulator, and not even talking about Europe, but I'm talking about nationwide financial regulator, proved to be very, very strong to convince an organization like Microsoft or Amazon that something special needed to be done. So I must say, a senior manager into an organization subject to DORA, you might be interested to know that your regulator will help you to get more things from your third-party players than you could on your own, and I have witnessed that firsthand in the past.
Okay, yeah, I think lucky. I think it's a balancing interest, and to some extent, it makes also life easier for that third party, because instead of dealing with many individual requirements, hopefully they get a more clear, uniform view of the world. And I think because dealing with so many regulators is certainly also not practical from their side. So next to, I think, we have seen ICT risk management. Of course, it's obvious. It's a preventive part. We have seen the third-party side is a big and increasing part, and structural changes. And we have also incident reporting, which is suddenly becoming a big thing. It's not only incident management, but of course it's a big thing, but incident reporting in particular is important. And we have seen that with GDPR, I think in a larger scale for the first time. And it is extremely powerful. Sometimes it works against you because you have to report an incident, and that's never great. But I think also if you have others reporting, you finally will a little bit have an idea what is the risk, what the incidents happening in your industry. And if it's for everybody, if it's happening, things are happening very far away, it doesn't mean the same thing. It's like reading the newspaper. But if it's your peers or you're in the same industry or segment, things are happening, it means you could be next in a big way. And I think that will be a big motivator actually on the preventive side, which is not incident reporting. Any thoughts on that?
I have to agree with you. Reporting, in my view, brings also fantastic value, aside from the fact that because of reporting you will learn about what's happening to your peers, and that might help you to reevaluate your risk landscape and understand that some elements need to be better addressed because some incidents have happened to your peers. But risk reporting also forces the organization to do some hygiene work that few organizations have done, which is to determine what is an incident. How do we qualify an incident? What are the criteria? The whole qualification of, is it a red level incident or a black level incident or a green level incident? That's a lot of work that usually the cybersecurity team is not very good at doing. The usually cybersecurity team is good at deploying some preventive measures, but they're not necessarily very good at looking at an incident, doing incident response, being able to communicate. And so the fact that DORA imposes the organization to really be able to inform whenever an incident happens is forcing these financial organizations to get their acts together. And I think this is a very positive thing.
Yeah, super. I think, you mentioned preventive incident response or incident management. I think another topic, we'll cover in the later session is, of course, it's called digital operational resiliency. So there's a resiliency aspect to it where a lot has to be said. So we'll go in the next videos individually through all those different sections, because there's a lot more to be said than in the 2 minutes we are able to dedicate here. So please stay tuned on that side. One important thing, I think, before we close this session, I would like to keep everybody's focus in, especially the management side, is there are a few things which may be more important and maybe more painful and maybe more priorities things than others. I think one is, of course, and that concerns the management. It's called the management body. That's the wording used in the regulation. There is sanctions now declared. A little bit, again, maybe copied from GDPR, I'm not sure. And sanctions are on individual member based. So it's not just a sanction to a body, but maybe even individual members. So if some members are more in charge of certain aspects of what the regulation covers, they are certainly more, let's say, at stake at this time. Even though the exact sanctions we have to see, we have to wait for the authorities to tell us more. Any thought about this on the sanction side? Because that was a big thing at the beginning of GDPR, and indeed some people have been sanctioned to the fullest of what GDPR planned. So it's maybe an important driver to motivate everybody to do better.
Working very often with the boards of banks, large and very small one, I know that very often the directors look at new regulation, and the question they ask is how painful is it going to be, and how personal is it going to be? And most regulations are not that painful and definitely not too personal, whereby DORA seems to have the ingredients to make it specifically painful, similar to what we saw with GDPR, and very personal, which is a fantastic thing because it forces all the people who are at the decision level or at the managerial level to really think their way through. You just cannot say, I didn't know, or this was not something I thought would be important. You can't say that. You have a direct responsibility, and you might have a big stick behind you if you do not carry these responsibilities. I'm sorry to say this is a positive thing, because human beings, we usually tend to see problems as something that will happen to someone else. Here, by making it present and directly relevant to the board directors and the senior executives, that enforces everyone to take their responsibility, which again, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I think, and there's maybe the last two words on this small introduction to DORA. I think, we have mentioned before incident reporting. Now there's your fourth report that may trigger a chain of events. You have to report at the beginning, at the middle, at the end, and maybe that could be related to other consequences later, depending on what the detail of the incident. And the second point, which could trigger things, is and we'll spend a lot of time, and that's quite unique about DORA, is they have planned systematic testing of a number of things which are included on the DORA side. Of course, it's mostly, if you're in the security side, it's more an attack simulation. Yeah, it's a red teaming exercise, but with the DORA framework in mind. And also, this has to be, there seems to be some reporting has to be done on the result of the testing. So at least these two things, the incident reporting and the test reporting, may trigger the attention of the authorities and could lead in some cases to more serious consequences. Any thoughts?
No, I think it's going the right way. I think that DORA has all the characteristics of a regulation that really makes sense, that is aligned with the reality of the risks, as opposed to some other regulation we have seen elsewhere and in the past that would be a little bit esoterical. They would speak in theory. DORA seems to be much more down to earth from that angle, and makes people accountable for the quality of what they put in place and how they do the supervision of the overall security of the organization. So from all these angles, I think this is a positive thing.
Okay, thank you. Well, I hope we could give you a little bit of taste of what's coming in the next videos. So stay tuned. We go a little bit more in depth, of course, to the different topics, and we'll have individual videos on individual topics because it's quite a wide area. So thank you very much, Pierre, for sharing these insights with us, and looking forward to the next videos.
Thank you, Guy. Looking forward to it too.
Thank you.